my slides.
Yes, Doc.
Okay, good morning. So my topic for this morning is on polycystic ovarian syndrome. Okay. I will be presenting two slide presentations. Actually, dapat ito lang, but I'm presently studying lifestyle medicine. So we had this lecture last week on PCOS to how to change your lifestyle for PCOS patients, and it will be an addendum to my lecture for this morning, and so that when you have your PCO patients, you will be able to better explain and treat them more appropriately by including your lifestyle modification. Okay, so bonus lang yung second lecture. So for this morning, I'll be discussing PCOS and hyperandrogenism. So when you say PCOS or polycystic ovarian syndrome, it's the most common endocrinopathy of reproductive age women. So prevalence of as high as 6 to 13% in reproductive age group. And as of the moment, diagnosis and management still continue to be controversial. But as we go along, we're learning a lot about PCOS already. So how do you diagnose though? So there are plenty or there are many diagnostic criteria. Okay, the more common ones are your National Institute of Health 1990 diagnosis, your Rotterdam criteria 2003, and your androgen excess and PCOS society, wherein they want an hyperandrogenism plus one criterion to achieve PCOS diagnosis. For your, of course, for all these three categories, you have to exclude other androgen excess related disorders. For your NIH, you are not required to have PCOS as ovarian, polycystic ovaries, I mean, morphology as a criteria for your PCOS. So for your androgen excess, hyperandrogenism is a required criterion. So for us, we are presently using the Rotterdam criteria, which is 2 out of the 3. Okay. And of course, exclusion of other androgen excess related disorders. So 2 out of the 3, ovulatory dysfunction, hyperandrogenism, and polycystic ovary morphology on your ultrasound. Okay, so there's a difference between the adult and diagnosis of PCOS in the adolescent. For your adolescent, you need to have the 3, okay? Hyperandrogenism, ovulatory dysfunction, and of course, your polycystic ovary. So when you say clinical hyperandrogenism, this would include your acne, alopecia, kalbo, hirsutism, or very, very hairy. So we are using this in the third picture, the modified Ferryman-Galway score. And we're going to, we have a checklist on how hairy your patient is, and a level of 8 or more is considered abnormal. However, we don't really use this because in our country, there's no local standard yet for Ferryman-Galway. So we are still relying on other countries' standard. Okay, that's the problem. So maybe one of you can do a study on that so that we will be having our own Filipino modified Galway score. What is appropriate? Is 8 really appropriate for us, or we need to lower it down or maybe increase it? So biochemical hyperandrogenism, when you have high testosterone and this is present in your PCOS, maybe because of a high insulin triggered by the ovaries, too much stress, and this is causing havoc in the adrenals, or excess body fat, which is also contributes to your hyperandrogenism. Your excess body fat contributes to the increase in androgen. So we calculate free testosterone, free androgen index, or calculated bioavailable testosterone using your liquid chromatography mass spectrometry. So by ultrasound, this is the newer diagnosis, okay? Use of a transvaginal ultrasound with a frequency bandwidth of 8 megahertz. And in this criterion, you should have a polycystic ovarian morphology of 20 per ovary and or an ovarian volume of more than 10 cc per ovary. Okay, the old one is more than 12 follicles, and if you see an older textbook, you might even read rosary like or bead like peripheral small follicles, maybe 12 or more. So they have different criteria, but this is the latest. Okay, as you can see in the picture, the follicles are in the periphery. Okay, but the criteria now is that they don't have to be in the periphery. Okay, that's the older definition. So when you have PCOS, there are a lot of manifestations, okay? Of course, we have the classic, which is, again, hyperandrogenism, anovulation, and presence of PCO. But there are variants, okay? We can also have non-classic ovulatory, wherein you only have hyperandrogenism and presence of PCO. You have we have the classic non-polycystic, wherein you have oligo or anovulation with hyperandrogenism, or you also have the non-classic, which is your mild, wherein you have PCOS and only an ovulation. Okay. And we have the different types: type A, type B, type C, type D. So type A, delayed ovulation, androgens, and PCOS. So this is the classic. Type B, delayed an ovulation and high androgens. Type C, which is your high androgens and PCO. And type D, which is your PCOS and an ovulation. So they classified the mild or non-classical into 4 types. So again, the pinakamadami in terms of percentage is your classic or your phenotype A. Okay, it's around 45.6% of your PCOS, followed by your uh, type D, and then type C and B. Okay, so this is still what we are using as our guideline when we treat our PCOS, which is the International Evidence-Based Guideline, which is a collaboration of the different international societies, including your American Society for Reproductive Medicine, ASRM, and our ESHRE, which is the European counterpart. Okay, so this is what we are using for our as our guideline. So when you say PCOS, you are going to be exposed to a different um, criterion for your PCOS. The patient can have irregular menses. The patient can have androgen excess. The patient may have excess body hair, all because of your insulin resistance. The patient may have acne because of your hyperandrogenism. And what we are worried now is uh, uh, diabetes, mellitus, and obesity may even lead to having your dyslipidemia or even your metabolic syndrome. So the treatment will be based depending on what the patient needs or wants. Okay, maybe if She doesn't want to get pregnant. She just want to have her menses be regular. Then you give the appropriate management, which I will be discussing later. Okay, there are multiple manifestations of your PCOS. Okay, and these are the following. So in this table, as you can see, that's why we're worried about PCOS for our reproductive age group. A lot of them will have infertility. Okay, this is followed by your menstrual disturbances, irregular menstruation, and then followed by your hyperandrogenism, and then closely followed by your oligomenorrhea, and of course, a lot of them are obese. Okay, and a few of them are they don't have symptoms, and some would really have amenorrhea. Okay, so it depends. So again, what's the pathophysiology? So it's a combination of a lot of factors. Your primarily your insulin resistance, but you also have an anti-inflammatory process going on, and of course your androgen excess. So this is just the way PCOS is deemed to be how it's causing your androgen excess. So, and eventual arrest in follicle development. That's why you have infertility. So basically, maybe it's because of our genes or because the patient is obese. That's why she has a lot of androgen in her fat cells. Or maybe she's having sedentary lifestyle or intrauterine androgen exposure. Because of this, you will have increase in your GnRH pulses. And if you remember your polycystic HPO axis, hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis, because of the increase in the GnRH, there's increased LH and FSH ratio. And again, because of the increased LH in the theca cells, you will have androgen excess. And then on the other side, you will have insulin resistance and causing hyperinsulinemia, and increase in androgen enzyme and decrease in sex hormone binding globulin. So there's a lot of androgen in the bloodstream as well. So arrest in antral follicle development and causing infertility. So insulin resistance can also lead to your comorbids, including your type 2 diabetes mellitus, your dyslipidemia, and even heart problems like your heart hypertension, your coronary artery vascular disease, and the like. Okay, so again, this is just a summarize of the neuroendocrine changes in PCOS. So for your GnRH, there's increase in the pulse frequency. Your FSH is decreased due to the increased GnRH pulse and negative feedback from your estrogen. Okay, your LH is increased from the abnormal LH secretory dynamics. There is normal or modestly increased inhibin from the small follicles. The estrogen is chronically elevated, again derived from the peripheral fat cells, aromatization of your increased androstenedione from your fat cells. Progesterone is decreased because of chronic anovulation. Okay, so what's this? Acanthosis nigricans. Okay, these are areas of thickened and darkened skin appearing in the axilla, the nape of the neck, in skin folds and knuckles and all elbows. Okay, because of your insulinemia. So now, after the diagnosing the patient with PCOS, what is our role as a doctor, as the gynecologist? Okay, so we manage and prevent and refer. So let's go first to management. So we are going to manage what the patient would like us to, what her concern is. Okay, so does she have menstrual irregularities, hirsutism, or even infertility? Okay, so PCOS, because of tingnan mo yung classic itsura niya, usually they're on the obese side, they are hairy, um, they have diabetes, they have dyslipidemia, they have hypertension, they have a lot of diseases. So usually, along the way, they get anxious, they get depressed, they have negative body image, and eventually have psychosexual dysfunction. Okay, and because of these factors, sometimes they are also associated with your eating disorders, such as your anorexia, bulimia, and even binge eating disorders. Okay? So when we do our history, dapat we ask the patient kung how's her mental health, okay? And how does she cope with her PCOS, okay? So, of course, the treatment is address that, okay? So, advise them to increase physical activity. So ideal is 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity, the physical activity, or 75 minutes per week of vigorous, okay, intensity. And this should include weight bearing, okay, or muscle strengthening exercises, not just cardio, okay. And again, we have to keep the weight within normal limits or reduce, advise them to lose weight if they are overweight or obese, okay. So there should be a decrease in the net caloric intake of the patient. So try to achieve energy deficit of 30% or decrease in the caloric intake of around 500 kilocalorie. So just consume around 1.2 to 1.5 kilocalories. There's a computation for this, but I'm just presenting to you the general caloric intake. Okay, so try to eat food with low glycemic index. Yung mga, for example, kamote, yung mga ganun. So, hindi magsa-spike yung sugar nila, especially if they are diabetic already. So, when you deal with your patient, try to ask them ano yung kaya nilang gawin. Okay? So, baby steps. Okay? But the key here is consistency. Okay? So, ano yung kaya nilang gawin for this week, and then try to follow her up after 1 or 2 weeks kung nagawa ba niya yon. So, smart goals dapat lagi. So, specific, measurable. So, sabihin niya sa inyo, maglalakad siya ng 20 minutes a day. So, tatanong nyo kung what part of the day. Okay? So, measurable. So, that's 30 minutes a day, sabi niya. So, is this achievable? Okay? So, meron ba siyang area na lalakaran? So, tanong nyo kung saan siya maglalakad. Accessible ba sa kanya yung sinasabi niya? Kunwari, sabi niya, taga sa inyo siya, tapos ang goal niya is maglalakad daw siya sa Clark. Of course, that will be very difficult for the patient to do. Okay, so tell her just to walk in the area near her where she lives or where she works. Okay, it should be realistic. And of course, it's time bound. Okay, so meron talaga siyang smart goals. And then, because by having so, she will be she will be achieving her goal, her personal goal, compared with I plan to lose weight, ganyan. So very different approach is needed for these patients para maging successful sila. So let's go to combined oral contraceptive pills. Okay. So when you say COCs, usually we give this as first line, especially if the patient's concern is to just regulate her menstruation and not get pregnant. So it's a combination of two types of your steroids, which is your usually ethinyl estradiol and they are now at a lower dose at 20 to 35 micrograms per tablet, plus your progestins. Okay, usually we prefer the low androgenic progestin or your anti-androgen because nga they have hirsutism. Okay. So this table just shows you the different pills we have in the market, what is their estrogen content and their progestin content. Usually, we give the lower doses now here at the bottom are 4-gen progestins, and because we want um, least metabolic side effects, and we want those with which are anti-androgens. Okay, so this slide, it can be seen in your book, just shows you the contraindications to the use of your COC. So absolute contraindications, what are they? Thrombophlebitis or thromboembolic disorder. Of course, if you have CAD, coronary artery disease, carcinoma of the breast, okay, or other estrogen-dependent neoplasia or neoplasm, because your pill is half estrogen, okay. Undiagnosed abnormal bleeding, uterine bleeding or genital bleeding, you have to take care of that first, okay. Known or suspected pregnancy, definitely if your patient is pregnant, she cannot take the pill. Benign or malignant liver tumors, if there is jaundice, if there is hepatic neoplasia, abnormal liver function, and of course, hypersensitivity to your pill. Relative contraindications would include your age. So the older, the more chances that she will have comorbids, which renders her not not suited to taking the pill. Diabetes, hypertension, if they are not controlled, smoking, gallbladder disease, gestational cholestasis, history, renal problems, liver problems, hyperlipidemia, which is not controlled, varicosities, migraine with aura, and major surgery with prolonged immobilization. So you have to personalize or individualize, okay, your treatment. So you really need to extract, or you really need to ask the patients um, their history, their medical history. Okay. So we use also COCs for your hyperandrogenism and of course your irregular cycles. So it's the first line for both adult and adolescents. Okay. We want to give the lowest possible estrogen dose to minimize the side effects. Okay. And usually for hirsutism, it's a longer treatment, at least 6 months. So now for the giving of your pills, we rely on the WHO medical eligibility criteria for your contraceptive use. During our time, it's a book, very, very thick, but now it can be downloaded for free in the internet. Okay, so you can download this, and whenever you have a patient who needs pills, you can just refer to that app, and it's going to give you the the dose that you can give as a contraception to the patient. And this is not just limited to the oral contraceptive pills, even the implants, even the IUD, when are they indicated and when are they contraindicated. Okay. So this is some good news, because when the patient is on the pill, there are also non-contraceptive benefits that she will have. Okay, so there's decreased risk of your endometrial, ovarian, and colorectal cancers. Improved BMD or your bone mineral density, induction of amenorrhea for lifestyle considerations. Sometimes you don't want the uh, uh, person to have menstruation to so that especially like for example, she's anemic, so that you are going to not incur blood loss. So to regulate the menstrual cycle, prevent menstrual migraines. It treats acne. A lot of my adolescent or early 20s patients are very happy because their skin gets clear when they are on the pill. Less bleeding or even minimize or even outright no bleeding for your myomas. Treatment of your dysmenorrhea, hirsutism, menorrhagia, and even PMS. Okay? So these are the common side effects of the pill. Sometimes they have headaches, breast tenderness, nausea, and even bleeding between periods. So usually what I do is I don't tell them of the possible side effects, but I tell them to come see me after a week on the pill, for example, and I ask them how they are with the pill. Okay, so usually we give them around 3 months to adjust to the pill. So for example, if the headache or the breast tenderness are tolerable, then I ask them if they still want to continue with that pill or shift to another preparation. Okay. Sometimes, more often than not, they are willing to continue the pill for a while, and eventually, after the body adjusts to the pill, all these side effects would lessen or even disappear. Okay, so give the body time to adjust. So second line treatment, COCs plus lifestyle plus metformin. So you can add metformin if the combined oral contraceptive pill with your lifestyle modification do not work. Okay. Add metformin also for obese patients and for high metabolic risk groups if they are at risk for your diabetes especially. Okay. So as of now, usually we use our anti-androgens in congruence or at the same time with our COCs because we don't want to have male fetal virilization just in case the patient is pregnant. Okay. And usually we give this more than 6 months, especially while they are still when they are still they have hirsutism. They really want to improve on that. We might also advise cosmetic treatment as well. So this can also be considered for your androgenic alopecia. Okay, so again, we go now to your hyperandrogenism, so which is hirsutism, alopecia, and acne. So when you say hirsutism, this is defined medically as excessive terminal hair that appears in a male pattern. Okay, that is your sexual hair. Okay, and this occurs in your PCOS. So what are the androgen sensitive areas? So face, upper lip, chin, your breasts, lower abdomen, inner thighs, and lower back. Okay, so remember that the half-life of the hair growth cycle is 6 months. That's why when you treat hyperandrogenism, especially your hirsutism, they will need to take the medication for at least 6 months. So central, okay, yung where the hair is. So usually, di ba, may mga bigote sila, they're very hairy. So kami kasi as soon as the patient enters our clinic, sometimes we already say, oh, PCO ka ba? Usually when they will say, oh, yes po. So because of their appearance. Okay? So when to test for androgen levels, when the patient has moderate or severe hirsutism. Okay? Or if there's hirsutism na bigla. Okay? When suddenly she gets hairy, so we have to test for hirsutism, which when there is an acute onset. Okay, so what's the goal of treatment? reduce androgen production, decrease the fraction of circulating testosterone, and limit androgen bioactivity to the hair follicle. Okay, so since the patient is with us, usually we refer them to our friend dermatologist who will do the treatment for that. So, or we can advise them to undergo plucking, shaving, waxing, use of depilatory creams, or even laser electrolysis of the hair follicles. Okay. So we can do our monotherapy or combination. Usually we give the pill which has anti-androgen, which is your cyproterone acetate. Okay. And treatment is more than 6 months because usually it takes um, that much time for the androgen to take their effect. Okay. Again, we usually give this for in combination with your contraception, okay, just to make sure that the patient does not get pregnant while being treated. Okay, so here are the things we can give: spironolactone, finasteride, and flutamide. So again, we go back to this. So what else is the problem with the patient? So we manage infertility if that's the problem with the patient. So how? By giving our ovulation induction agents in the form of oral, like your letrozole, your clomiphene citrates, or injectable, such as your gonadotropins. And we can even give your insulin sensitizing agents. And during my time, we do a lot of laparoscopic ovarian drilling to make that ovary respond to your fertility drugs. But nowadays, we usually resort to assisted reproductive techniques such as your IVF, your ICSI. And I think I'll be discussing that next week, no? That will be my last lecture with you, infertility. So again, prevent. Okay, we just don't manage, but continue. It should be because PCOS is a lifelong disease. Okay, we just don't manage if she has already diabetes, metabolic syndrome, but we want to prevent that. Okay, so how? By monitoring her. Usually we assess her by doing our OGTT, FBS, HbA1c every 1 to 3 years. Okay. For us for infertility, we already ask for OGTT, especially if the patient is obese, just to check if she's diabetic, so she can be treated right away. So we also want to prevent your cardiovascular diseases. So offer regular monitoring, the weight, height, waist circumference, waist hip ratio is very important, BMI. So we need to screen for risk factors such as your obesity, smoking, dyslipidemia, your hypertension, IGT, and whether she does physical activity. So, and encourage her to do so. So how else what else do we want to prevent? Endometrial cancer. So they are at risk for 2 to 6 times increased risk, and we may use COCs or progesterone therapy for that, especially for those not um having their menstruation, because not having menstruation might lead to the thickening of your endometrial lining. And if they are age 35 or more, and by the history, we see suspicious for endometrial cancer, and thickening of that endometrium, and the patient's age is 35 or more, then this might warrant doing endometrial sampling, okay, just to check if that does not become hyperplasia, or hopefully not endometrial cancer. So where are we? So we want to prevent endometrial cancer. So now we are going to refer the patient if they indeed do have their diabetes, their dyslipidemia, their cardiovascular diseases, or in other words, metabolic syndrome. We now refer to our colleagues, our cardiologists, our endocrinologists. Okay? So PCOS is a lifelong disease. Okay. When the woman is younger, in the reproductive age group, we are treating the menstrual disorders, hirsutism, to regularize her menstruation, uh, or if she wants to get pregnant, infertility. But as they grow older, it becomes now a metabolic disease. Okay, so they get this type 2 diabetes, they get this coronary artery vascular diseases, even endometrial cancer. So it's a multidisciplinary approach, okay? And all these specialties can be privy to the treatment of your PCOS, okay? Cardiologists, endocrinologists, diabetologists, derma, and even the geriatrics, okay? So just take a picture of this. These are my references. Although PCO is very common. Okay. So there are a lot of references in your book and even online. So even ChatGPT, I know they you can have a summary of your PCOS. Okay, so this is my last slide. Again, thank you very much. So, as I said earlier, I want just to give you another lecture on lifestyle medicine to help you with your how you manage your patients in the future. Wait, I will share another. I will give you a bonus lecture. Ay, nawala. Yeah. So I have to stop this first. And then share. Okay, can you see my slide?
Yes.
Can you see? So this is just an adjunct to my lecture earlier. Okay, so I asked permission to present this to you. So as we all know, lifestyle medicine is now actually a subspecialty of the residency of family and community medicine in Philippine General Hospital. And it's becoming uh, a trend now, actually not a trend, it's becoming very important to include lifestyle medicine into our daily lives because we want prevention, especially we are a third world country. We cannot afford all these treatments. As you know, our PhilHealth is being robbed of its budget. So we as doctors, uh, we need to do our share, okay, in preventing, like for our topic today, preventing the complications of your PCOS, or help them in treatment by addressing things that usually we take for granted. So this is integrating pathophysiology, diagnosis, and microbiome-based nutrition care. Okay. So we discussed this earlier, the symptoms, which are, according to lifestyle medicine, they are surface symptoms, okay? Your irregular menses, hirsutism, acne, alopecia, infertility. So we discussed this earlier, right? So unfortunately, below the waterline, where we do not see or we do not explore are other problems. Of course, we discussed insulin resistance, but there is we touched on inflammation, but there's also gut microbiome dysbiosis, and we discussed hyperandrogenism and ovarian dysfunction. Okay. So PCOS pathophysiology has many rings to it. Okay, so uh, I mentioned this increased risk for your DM, escalated risk for cardiovascular, and persistent infertility and pregnancy complications, and of course, psychological. We've touched on this also later. Earlier, with having elevated rates of depression and reduced overall quality of life. Okay. So from the conventional approach of the patient treating the symptoms, we now add, okay, lifestyle medicine into our treatment and management. Okay, and centering on this is nutrition as a therapy and addressing the microbiome. Okay. So, in PCOS pathology, again, there's insulin resistance, hyperandrogenism, ovarian dysfunction, inflammation, and gut microbiome dysbiosis. Okay. Sometimes we forget about that. Okay. So, uh, of course, insulin resistance is the central engine. Okay. Again, I mentioned this earlier, leading to hyperinsulinemia, triggers increased ovarian androgen production, and increases the testosterone in your bloodstream. Okay. So in the healthy person, you will have follicular development, ovulation, and regular menses. In the patient with PCOS, there's arrest of your follicles, okay, and chronic anovulation. So resulting in irregular or entirely absent menstrual cycles and infertility. Okay. So they found out that there is this leaky gut, okay, in PCOS. So there is altered gut flora compromising the mucosal lining, leading to increased intestinal permeability and allow the lipopolysaccharides to enter the circulation and triggering endotoxemia, which severely exacerbates hormonal imbalances. Okay, so causing your obesity or causing your infertility. So we must break this cycle. Okay, so gut dysbiosis, especially this one is new to us, which cascades back to um, testosterone and it goes on and on. Okay, so another important thing is that we need to uh, find out other disorders such as your thyroid problems, hyperprolactinemia, and your non-classic congenital adrenal hyperplasia and Cushing syndrome, just to rule out other causes of your obesity, of your infertility. So maybe the patient has other comorbids or problems. That's why she's having difficulty getting pregnant. Okay, so the gut ovary axis. Okay, so dysbiosis leads to decreased barrier integrity and elevated lipopolysaccharide endotoxins, and this travel to the system, to the body, and even reaches the ovaries, and therefore altering the development of your follicles, causing your infertility. Okay, so what do? We need to increase our fiber in the diet. Okay, because soluble fiber binds directly to excess circulating estrogen excreted into the gut via the bile, and it prevents reabsorption of your excess estrogen. Okay, establishing a crucial mechanism for baseline hormonal balance. Okay. So again, dietary fiber will be beneficial when it enters your system, and you are going to produce your short chain fatty acids, your butyrate, propionate, and your acetate. Okay, so what happens? What are the benefits of your short chain fatty acids? Okay, they will improve cellular insulin sensitivity, positively influence appetite regulating hormones like your GLP-1 and your PYY, your reduce systemic inflammatory cascades, and reinforces and heals the gut mucosal barrier, therefore reversing the endotoxemia. Okay, so we want them to eat predominantly whole food, plant-based, low glycemic load intake of food. Try to increase fiber, minimize refined carbohydrates and ultra-processed foods. Eat food rich in omega-3, and of course, adequate high-quality plant protein. Okay, so less preservatives. So high glycemic load includes your sugary beverages, refined flour products. So this would cause glucose spikes. Okay, so it upregulates your ovarian and androgen excess. So we want the patient to eat whole grains, brown rice, oats, legumes, non-starchy vegetables for a slow and steady glucose absorption. So this improves cellular insulin sensitivity and reduces your androgen production, which is what the patient needs. Okay. So the target is around 25 to 35 grams of fiber per day. And fiber would slow glucose absorption in the GI tract, so lessens the chances of your insulin spikes, regulates your hormone, binds the excess and estrogen for it to be eliminated, and promotes mechanical fullness, supporting sustainable weight management, and of course acts as an exclusive substrate for your short chain fatty acid fermentation. So that's how important fiber is. Also, because of the dysbiosis, we want to encourage them to eat prebiotics, okay, such as your garlic, your onion, bananas, and your asparagus, and probiotic foods, okay. So fermented veggies, your kimchi, your yogurt, etc., to support your gut microbiome. Okay, so we want also uh, polyphenols, which are powerful antioxidants. Okay, so eat a lot of berries, okay, which are high in anthocyanins, okay, and green tea is good, which is rich in catechin, supporting metabolic rate and insulin sensitivity. And cocoa, okay, which is flavanol rich, supporting cardiovascular elasticity and reducing inflammation. But of course, wag niya isama dun sa mga rich, yung mga chocolate, okay? Because sugar naman yung kalaban dun. So it's a balance, okay? So prefer the dark chocolate, but of course, watch out also for the sugar content, okay? So again, we want to include omega-3 fatty acids into the diet because they are anti-inflammatory, okay? Lowers C-reactive protein and inhibits your pro-inflammatory cytokines, okay? And they also enhance cell membrane fluidity, improving the efficiency of insulin receptor binding, okay? So what are these? Foods example like your flax seeds, chia seeds, and your walnuts are rich in omega-3 fatty acids. Okay, so Plant-based protein provide essential amino acids packed naturally with fiber, avoiding the inflammatory compounds, which we can see in our processed meats. So advise them to eat lots of lentils, chickpeas, tofu, green leafy vegetables. Okay, so it doesn't give a postprandial spike compared with your meaty vegetables, and you get satisfied sooner than when you eat your sugary food products. Okay, so we want to include whole, minimally processed plant foods, high fiber, okay, diet, and exclude processed meats, trans fats, ultra processed foods. Okay, so usually we advise the Mediterranean diet, whole food, predominantly plant-based if hindi nila kaya totally plant-based. Okay, so this is the Pinggang Pinoy we have. So ideally, we should have half of our plate is non-starchy vegetables. Okay, 1/4 composed of whole grains, complex carbohydrates to prevent insulin surging. 1/4 is your plant protein, essential amino acids for tissue repair. And outside lang yung, see the dotted line at the outermost part of the plate. So these are your healthy fats, okay? So kung pwede, your coconut oil, olive oil, but they are still fats, okay? So, but we have to minimize also the intake of our fats. So, morning, we have to be consistent in timing our meals based on our circadian rhythm. We have to be mindful of what we eat. So, not multitasking while eating, especially us, sakit natin yan. Nagmamadali tayo lagi. So, let's advise our patient and ourselves to eat slowly. So, mindful eating practices to improve our digestion and absorption and to lower that cholesterol. Okay? So, hydration optimization. So, increase or oral fluid to maintain that mucosal barrier intact. And of course, reduce late night eating, okay, to prevent insulin spikes and support your fasting repair states, okay? Because repair is being done at night when we are resting, okay? So we have to achieve that, what, ideally 7 to 9 hours per day, and be asleep by 10 p.m. The best time to sleep is the 10 to 2 period. So hopefully you as medical students as well are sleeping the right amount of number of hours. Okay, so not all PCOS patients are obese, okay? But we must focus on the internal metabolic health and insulin sensitivity, not just on the weight, okay? And if the patient is infertile, we target microbiome nutrition because more often than not, they will spontaneously ovulate, and this would enhance physiological response to concurrent fertility treatments. Okay, again, we want to integrate lifestyle medicine into our treatment management for these patients because nutrition should be the first line therapy, but it cannot function alone. Okay, it should be in concurrent with our therapies, but we should not take it for granted. So, nutrition, and then, of course, physical activity to burn that excess glycogen, okay? Sleep optimization, prevent circadian rhythm disruption, and cortisol-induced insulin resistance, and of course, stress management. Usually, di ba sabi nila, hindi sila magregla kasi pag stress sila, pag marami silang iniisip. So, help them manage their stress in life by uh, maybe do some meditation, do some me time. So this will lower chronic sympathetic nervous system activation, and they will feel better, they will feel more relaxed. So, and maybe try to tell them to be grateful for the blessings they have, so that yung mindset nila will turn positive instead of always being masungit or negative. Okay? And this will help a lot in their system. So, PCOS is a systemic, metabolic, hormonal, and inflammatory. Okay? So, we should not forget that aside from insulin resistance, there is dysbiosis. Okay? And we need fiber and microbiome modulation to lessen that dysbiosis in the gut. Okay? So, we want to empower our patients by advising them on this evidence-based lifestyle modification. Okay? Ay, that's the end of my slide. Okay, so any questions? So let's not forget, no, that let's not focus on the diagnosis of PCOS, but try to treat them as a whole. So any questions from the group? Do you have questions? Did you